Women's suffrage is often related back to women being treated bad. However, suffrage is the right or privilege of voting and is frequently incorporated among the rights of citizenship. Throughout U.S. history, persons have been denied suffrage based on sex, race, age, and income.
Prior to 1919, women in Chicago had no rights. All women were good for was cooking, cleaning, and providing for the family. Women were expected to be obedient and agree to everything their husband said. The battle to eliminate discrimination against women had been an ongoing issue since the 1700s.
Jane Addams was a reformer in working conditions for children and women in Chicago, and a leader in women's suffrage and world peace. She established homes, such as the Hull House, for them to have shelter. Jane Addams revolutionized settlement housing. Her ideas influenced social, political, and economic reform in Chicago. Jane Addams was born on September 6, 1860, in Centerville, Illinois. She was the youngest of 8 children. Her father served as an Illinois senator. Her mother died in childbirth when she was only 2, and half of her siblings also died by the time she was 8. In her teens, Addams had big dreams to do something useful in the world. Long interested in the poor from her readings and inspired by her mother's kindness to the Centerville poor, she decided to become a doctor so that she could live and work among the poor. Her father encouraged her to keep studying, so she attended college in Rockford, Illinois. After graduating in 1881, she hoped to keep attending school to earn a proper Bachelor of Art. However, her father died unexpectedly and the family all moved to Philadelphia, so the youngest of Jane Addams' brothers could continue their medical education.
Jane Addams and her sister both continued their studies as well in medical schools at the Women's Medical College of Philadelphia. But because of health conditions Jane Addams had with her spine and a nervous breakdown, it prevented her from continuing her dreams. That year, the family all returned to Centerville, Illinois. The following year, Jane Addams had surgery to fix her spine, and after that she decided that instead of pursuing her studies, she'd travel. In the summer of 1887, she read a magazine about a settlement house and decided to visit the first in London. This house inspired Jane Addams to return to the United States with her friend Ellen Gates Starr, and founded the Hull House in Chicago, Illinois, which was known as the first settlement house in the United States.
By its second year of existence, Hull House was host to 2,000 people every week. There were kindergarten classes in the morning, club meetings for older children in the afternoon, and for adults in the evening. More clubs or courses in what became virtually a night school. Jane Addams created settlement.
One of the important aspects of Jane Addams establishing the Hull House was that she was a recently educated white woman who saw a need for an interaction between Americans who had sort of lived here for a long time and immigrants. And so the most important thing I think about Hull House was sort of the method in which Jane Addams approached her social change, and she didn't come into the community and say, I think that these things, X, Y, Z would be important for you immigrants to have or to think about. Is that she came in and asked questions and listened to them, and then proceeded to say, well, what can I do to help, as opposed to coming in from the outside and prescribing a certain agenda of her own to a community that she was getting to know. It was really very much about a conversation with her, and that's in some ways how all of the activism unfolded at Hull House.
She advocated for women's suffrage and took a leadership role as the vice president of the National American Women's Suffrage Association from 1911 to 1914. Consist with their notion of lateral progress, Adams' support for women's advancement was framed in terms of social progress rather than the principles of equality.
She just happened to be kind of historically in the right place in the right time. If she'd been born 500 years earlier, she would not have been the same person, and we would never have heard of her. But she, lived and really took part in a society that was changing and thinking about change and what it meant to be a cohesive, what it meant to be an American, and to be a progressive American.
Jane Addams didn't only reform women's issues, but also started a reform movement on issues such as protecting immigrants and juveniles. They formed an Immigrants Protective League and a juvenile court. They also started up the Juvenile Psychopathic Clinic. In 1903, the state of Illinois passed a protective legislation for women and children. In 1912, their efforts went national when the federal government began the Federal Children's Bureau. The child labor law that was passed in 1916 was even a part of Adams' works.
Jane Addams was a great leader, figure of the Progressive Era. The Progressive Era was a period of social activism and political reform that flourished through 1890s and the 1920s. Democracy to Jane Addams meant more than just living and social morality. Her definition is clearly defined in her book, Democracy and Social Ethics. Adams goes so far as to suggest that it was time that the United States, political institutions, and morality to progress.
She argued that the America's founders, whom she admired, developed the Bill of Rights based upon an individual sense of morality appropriate for their era. However, Adams viewed social morality as the appropriate response to the rise of big cities along with the improvements in technology and transportation that brought so many people together. She wanted democracy to grow and flourish, which required ongoing conversation and change. Jane Addams was an inspirational figure whose ideas helped influence social, political, and economic reform.
Sadly, Jane Addams died on May of 1935. Shortly before her death, Addams was honored at an event marketing to the 20th anniversary of the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom. In response to the many tributes she received, she said she was driven by the fear that she might give up too soon and fail to make the one effort and she might save the world.